Hi, and welcome to New God Sunday School. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee, and Jack Kirby's Star Warriors, The Adventures of Adam Star and the Solar Legion. I'm also the author of Witchman, a new superhero comic book which recently had a successful Kickstarter campaign. This is the first time in this New God Sunday School where we'll be looking at a comic that's not by Jack Kirby. This is a long-awaited return of Mr. Miracle. It's Mr. Miracle number 19. Jack Kirby's final issue was Mr. Miracle number 18. You could be in the Superman movie. Details inside. They've gotten an all-star team to try and follow up on Jack Kirby. It's a big task following Jack Kirby on something like Mr. Miracle. And so they've gotten Steve Engelhart and Marshall Rogers, the team that worked on one of the greatest runs of Batman ever, which is saying a lot. There's been so many wonderful Batman runs, but Steve Engelhart and Marshall Rogers did sort of the legendary one with Silver St. Cloud and Deadshot, the return of Deadshot, and a remake of the original Joker Fish. It's just if you haven't read it, it's an amazing comic. So it's like, this is sort of your best shot. And I do wonder if in 1977, if they were sort of regarded that way. It's kind of like looking back through comics history, it's like, yeah, it's a legendary team. That's a legendary run. But I wonder if at the time it was just kind of like, oh yeah, those guys did a good job on Batman. Let's pair them up for this, the return of Mr. Miracle. Also, this comes out in September 1977. Jack Kirby's New Gods, Mr. Miracle, all that stuff makes so much sense in a post-Star Wars world. And so this comic book is coming out in a post-Star Wars world. So all of a sudden, people who might have been like scratching their heads or saying, hey, I don't get it. What's up with these new Jack Kirby comics? Once you've seen Star Wars, it makes all the sense in the world. Scott Free and Big Barda walking through New Genesis, Supertown. It's a beautiful shot, just really great sci-fi art here. And they're on their honeymoon and they're restless for new adventures. And this statue here looks like it's a statue of Big Barda. So I don't know, they don't say in the text, but I wonder if they constructed a statue of Big Barda in honor of their wedding, or if maybe there's some new god or some old god who looked a lot like Barda or wore similar armor. Highfather shows up. We get some exposition getting us sort of, caught up with the story as we've seen it before. They have a quiet moment, a kiss, and then boom, the action begins. And it's, the greatest hits. We get all the old favorites pouring in. We get Granny Goodness, Kanto the Assassin, Vermin Wunderbar, and Dr. Bedlam. And, it's all out action, really nice artwork. And this is also after Walt Simonson's Manhunter series. And so it bears an influence of that. Walt Simonson's Manhunter sent ripples through the comic book professional community. Everybody who saw it, it like blew their minds, and it left a mark and an influence on the industry, especially artists. It's, a really nice looking book so far. They kidnap Barda, take her through the boom tube. Highfather's sort of telling the story of what Orion's up to, because prior to this Mr. Miracle series, there have been a couple of New Gods revivals. They revived New Gods just as Jack Kirby was leaving DC. And there's some speculation that maybe it was a little bit of a carrot they were dangling in front of him to renew his contract at DC, but he was out the door. And probably for the best, because it wasn't long after this that the DC implosion happens and a lot of DC artists were all of a sudden, out of work. So if Jack had signed an exclusive contract with DC, in 1976 or 75, whatever it was, he'd be stuck on basically a sinking ship. And now we cut back to Oberon, who, you could presume, he hasn't seen them since the wedding, but it says here they haven't seen him since Batman Brave and the Bold. So I guess Mr. Miracle had like a little appearance there. So now he's, telling Oberon that he needs his help. He's going to go rescue Barda. There's a lot of, just like really innovative stuff going on with the artwork. And we have this house ad, at last, The Thrilling Return of Mr. Miracle by Steve Engelhart and Marshall Rogers. And yeah, it really does look great. And I see this series, the Marshall Rogers and Steve Engelhart run, as almost like a bridge to between the Kirby stuff and what Mr. Miracle will become. Because just looking at this, it looks a lot like the later creators take with the series. So I feel like sort of left their mark on the character. Granny Goodness is sort of looming and towering. And she tells Scott that if he wants to try to rescue Barda, he's going to have to remove his mother box from the equation. And earlier in the story, Granny Goodness says something about, how dare you call that device mother, with Granny being the only mother figure. I like that idea of her being sort of jealous of Scott's relationship with the mother box. Now, if you remember from previous episodes, Scott had jettisoned Mother Box a number of issues before Jack Kirby's final issue. They sort of, phased out all the New Gods stuff, and at a certain point, Mother Box gets burned out, and Scott never replaces her. He instead puts in circuits, but they're never referred to as Mother Box again. So I guess he's gotten his Mother Box back, and now he's, ripping it out. And so now he's got to face this problem without his Mother Box. But he's still got his sort of 1977 version of Harry Houdini gimmicks. He's got X-ray contact lenses, little bombs hidden under a false patch of skin. And he's got a tiny electronic lock pick along his upper gum. For whatever reason, this image kind of grosses me out a little bit, the idea of this like little lock pick or whatever, applied to his gum. And now he's ready to go in. And I feel like this is addressing something that a lot of people who wrote letters to Mr. Miracle when Jack was working on it, and even Mark Evanier himself expressed that Mr. Miracle's always getting out of trouble with his Mother Box. And that it would be kind of fun to see him get out of a trap where you can kind of like guess like, oh, how's he going to get out of this one? And where it's, rather than just every time it being, oh, Mother Box. Jack's response to that was that Harry Houdini took advantage of the technologies of his time. Mr. Miracle, Scott Free, is taking advantage of the technology and techniques of his time, which would be sort of this, futuristic version of the 1970s where he has access to New Genesis technologies. This works for me, the idea of sort of stripping down what Scott has access to. And so, making him into more of like a standard superhero escape artist. I like Jack's approach, but this works too. And this does sort of become the enduring approach to this character. You'll see it in other versions of the character. So here he is and ready to rescue Barda, but they're going to sort of take him for this little trip. I feel like this is like a famous etching or something that's being copied here. And he's getting strapped to one of his, death traps, getting placed in a sealed tube full of water. We're getting back to the basics of the Mr. Miracle character, where he's got his friend in danger, at this point his wife, and it's his sort of apocalypse people who are holding her hostage, and the only way to rescue her is by, defeating a death trap. And so he, uses his lock pick to get out of there. Now he's free, and they're moving Barda to another location. Scott Free has escaped, doesn't get to the bad guys in time. They set off a bomb. He comes out of it okay and vows to follow them to the moon. This is but half of a two-part summer send-off, folks. Now that you think you know what's going on, we're ready to really bamboozle you. And the next installment comes up on July 26th. Don't miss Eclipse. Steve Engelhart had sort of made a reputation for himself as like a comics wunderkind. Did some really amazing comics over at Marvel, working on, Jack's creations over at Marvel, like the Avengers. And then he sort of jumped ship to DC just for a little while, did that amazing Batman run, and then did a bunch of Justice League books, and then also worked on this, and then does a couple issues of this, and then he's sort of gone from DC just before the DC implosion. And so he's pulling out a lot of his tricks, kind of in some ways getting back to the basics of characters and figuring out what their appeal is and cutting them down to their essence, and also finding new spins on them, new angles to approach them from. And then also, he was sort of like a master of multi-part series. And so it wasn't until issues 3 and 4 that Jack started doing like a two-parter, but Engelhart's going right for it. And there's only one Jack Kirby, but Steve Engelhart and Marshall Rogers are doing a pretty great job here, holding their own. It's kind of a different story with the New Gods follow-ups, but I'm on board for this Mr. Miracle. Pretty good all the way through, and at a certain point, Engelhart leaves. Steve Gerber takes over, the other wunderkind that was at Marvel in the 70s, and Marshall Rogers leaves and is replaced by Michael Golden, who really, Michael Golden's work on Mr. Miracle was his portfolio piece that got him Micronauts. It really is like, I could see somebody looking at that and being like, okay, this is the guy for the job on that. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee, and Jack Kirby's Star Warriors, The Adventures of Adam Starr and the Solar Legion. I'm also the author of Witchman, a new superhero comic book which recently had a successful Kickstarter campaign. I'll see you next time for New Gods Sunday School.